Lola screamed and shouted for help as two armed men dragged her husband on his back to a white minibus, or Korokpe as it's popularly called in southwest Nigeria. It was the couple's first wedding anniversary and they were dining at a restaurant in Victoria Island, Lagos. Frank was shuffled into the rear seat of the minibus and handcuffed to the fabricated bench in the middle. The two men got in as well and the vehicle sped off. Other diners in the restaurant thought they had just witnessed a kidnapping, but Jide, the security guard, said he could identify one of the two men. He was Supol Jibola, a police officer with the Pedro Division of the Nigeria Police Force in Shomolu, Lagos. About an hour later, #Where's Frank was trending on Twitter, with pictures of both Frank and Supol Jibola tweeted and retweeted almost 20,000 times, along with mentions of the Nigeria Police Force. That is not a true story, but the reality of human rights violations in Nigeria is much stranger than fiction, and you don't have to wait to be a victim before you know your rights and remedies for the violation in Nigeria. Hello everyone, you're welcome to the 360 Solicitors Microcast, where we talk about the Nigerian law and how it affects your life and society. This is channel 2 and it's titled Your Rights and Their Limits in Nigeria. In this particular show, we plan to help you understand your fundamental rights and their limitations under the Nigerian law. The show will contain 25 short episodes which will update in installments. This is episode 1 and it's called Overview of Your Rights in Nigeria. As the name implies, you get an executive summary of your fundamental rights in this episode. By the way, nothing in this or any of our podcasts is legal advice. If you need legal assistance, please consult a lawyer. My own name is Ishaq, a Nigerian lawyer. Don't murder my name if you cannot pronounce it, just call me Shola for short. I'll be right back. Put simply, your right is something to which you are entitled. It can be created by your agreements with other persons, by others in your favor without your involvement, or by the law. While every fundamental right is a right, not every right is a fundamental right. You'll recall that in episode 3 of our first channel titled How the Law Works in Nigeria, we say the Nigerian Constitution spells out the rights and responsibilities of people in Nigeria. In Nigeria, your fundamental rights are the rights found in Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution of 1999. Of course, the Constitution gives you other rights, but because those other rights are in other parts of the Constitution instead of Chapter 4, they are simply called your constitutional rights. Fundamental rights are so important, the first thing the military regimes always did was to suspend them. The Constitution gives the government a lot of powers, including the legitimate use of force, which is why, for example, the president controls the armed forces and the Nigeria Police Force. But because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, the Constitution gives you fundamental rights as a way to limit the powers of the government. Your fundamental rights are important to your existence as a free person living in a free democratic society. These rights are similar to the rights in the American Bill of Rights and in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But your fundamental rights are not absolute either. The Constitution itself says they can be taken away in some special or general circumstances. Essentially, your fundamental rights can be limited in favor of the public or another individual. Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution begins at section 33 and ends at section 46. It is within these sections that you find your fundamental rights, and your first fundamental right is your right to life. Guaranteed by section 33 of the Constitution, the purpose of your right to life is to protect your existence and to ensure no one takes your life without a justifiable reason. Your right to life is not absolute in Nigeria because the government can take your life when you're convicted of a capital crime, and other individuals may justifiably take your life in self-defense or out of provocation. Of course, it is not that simple, but this is not the point where we go into the details. Your second fundamental right is right to dignity of human person, and it is guaranteed by section 34 of the Constitution. This right ensures that you exist with some dignity and respect for your person. Basically, this is the right that protects you from torture, slavery, and compulsory labor. This right is not absolute either. Special limitations include prison labor, serving in the NYSC, or conscription into the armed forces in times of emergency. Think about these questions. Is everything prohibited except what the law says you can do, or is everything permitted except what the law says you cannot do? Perhaps your third fundamental right is an answer. Your right to personal liberty is protected under Section 35 of the Constitution. This is the right that allows you to do as you wish except what the law says you cannot. It is also the right that protects you against arbitrary arrest and detention, and it similarly guarantees you bail pending your trial for a crime. Yes, there are limitations to this right as well. Following the due process of law, you can be detained by a court order or in a quarantine facility, a drug rehab center, or a mental institution. Again, it is not that simple. You'll get more explanations in later episodes. Right to fair hearing is your fourth fundamental right, and it is protected by Section 36 of the Constitution. If you have a case in a court or even before any administrative body such as a disciplinary tribunal, it is the right that ensures the court or the body is impartial, that you are given an equal opportunity to challenge any case against you and to present your own case in person or through your lawyer. Put simply, this right says you cannot be a judge in your own case to prevent bias, and neither can you be condemned without being heard first. This is also the right that prevents you from being tried over and over again for the same crime, or from being tried for a crime that doesn't exist at all. The limitations to this right are very technical and certainly not for discussion in this episode. Your fifth fundamental right is your right to private and family life under Section 37 of the Constitution. This right allows you to have a family and a love life. It prevents others from violating your general privacy and the privacy of your home, and from accessing your oral or written communications in any medium, online or offline, without justification. Your data is also protected under this right. A common exception to this right is the execution of search warrants, which allow law enforcement to search and seize items related to a crime from your person, your home, your office, and so on and so forth. Your sixth fundamental right is right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Guaranteed by Section 38 of the Constitution, this right allows you to believe or disbelieve in anything or anyone, including God. If you have a religion, it allows you to practice that religion in public or private, alone or with fellow believers. One special limitation to this right is that you cannot belong to a secret society. Secret society is a loaded term, and this is not where we go into the details. Right to freedom of expression and the press is your seventh fundamental right, and it is guaranteed by Section 39 of the Constitution. Your freedom of thought is useless if you cannot express your thoughts, so this right permits you to hold an opinion and to share or receive ideas or information using any medium. Yes, this right protects your social media posts, your blog, and even this podcast. A special limitation to this right is that you need a license before you can operate your television or radio station in Nigeria. And another common limitation to this right is the tort of defamation. Section 40 of the Constitution protects your right to peaceful assembly and association as your eighth fundamental right. This right allows you to associate with other people with whom you share interests. Because of this right, you can belong to a political party, a trade union, a business association, a school association, etc. Most importantly, this is the right that allows you to peacefully protest as a group. A special limitation to this right is allowing the Independent National Electoral Commission, or INEC, to refuse to recognize some political parties for justifiable reasons. Your ninth fundamental right is protected by Section 41 of the Constitution, and it is known as your right to freedom of movement. This is the right that allows a Nigerian citizen to visit or live anywhere in Nigeria. As a Nigerian, you cannot be prevented from going out of Nigeria, and neither can you be prevented from coming back into Nigeria. Imprisonment in Nigeria and extradition to other countries are two special exceptions to this right. Your 10th fundamental right is right to freedom from discrimination. It is protected by Section 42 of the Constitution. While discrimination is kind of allowed, it cannot be for the following reasons: your community, your ethnicity, your place of origin, your sex, your religion, your political opinion, and the circumstances of your birth. These reasons are known as the prohibited grounds of discrimination. This right essentially makes everyone equal before the law in terms of advantages and disadvantages. The most common exception to this right is the need for Nigeria's public institutions to reflect the federal character of the country or the diversity of a state. Federal character and diversity are two loaded terms, and again, this is not where we go into the details. Your 11th fundamental right is your right to own or acquire property anywhere in Nigeria. This right is protected by sections 43 and 44 of the Constitution. The two types of property you can own are both movable property and immovable property. Immovable property simply means land and anything attached to it. Any other type of property, including intellectual property, is movable property. However, all mineral resources in Nigeria, including oil and gas, on both land and in Nigeria's territorial waters and exclusive economic zones, belong to the federal government of Nigeria. A special limitation to this right is the power of the government to compulsorily acquire or take over your property. In that case, you must be promptly compensated, and you're allowed to go to court if you need to determine your right over that property and the proper amount of compensation. As stated earlier, your fundamental rights are not absolute. While the Constitution itself mentions special cases of limitation to some of them, it also allows other limitations if they satisfy three conditions. 1. The limitations must be spelled out by the law. 2. The limitations must be reasonable and justifiable in the context of a free and democratic society. 3. The limitations must also be in favor of defense, public order, public safety, public health, or public morality, or to protect the rights and freedoms of others. Criminal laws are a good example of general limitations to your fundamental rights. While, for example, you have the liberty to swing your arm as you please, that right must stop where my nose begins. If not, you may be guilty of criminal assault. The African Charter is an international treaty which Nigeria has domesticated. Like the Nigerian Constitution, the African Charter gives you individual human rights. But the African Charter goes further by also recognizing the rights of a people or a community as opposed to only the rights of an individual. If your right is about to be violated, if your right is being violated, or if your right has been violated, the Constitution gives you a special access to a high court to seek redress. That special access is called fundamental rights enforcement. When your right is violated without a justifiable excuse, remedies available to you include monetary compensation and injunctions. In later episodes, we'll have a detailed discussion of each one of your 11 fundamental rights as well as your other rights under the African Charter. Nothing in our podcast is legal advice. If you need legal assistance, please consult a lawyer. Do like the episode and subscribe to the channel for more. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The handle is at 360solicitors or at Shola for short. Until next time, cheers.